In a city where winter winds cut through the soul, one broken boy walked into a mechanic's workshop carrying a hope that would change 3 lives forever. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the grimy windows of Turner's Auto Repair in Duluth, Minnesota, casting long shadows across the cluttered workspace. Caleb Turner, 34, wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days, his calloused fingers testament to years of coaxing life from broken engines with nothing but determination and scraps. The November cold seeped through the workshop's thin walls, but Caleb barely noticed anymore. Poverty had taught him to ignore many discomforts. The bell above the door chimed, a sound so rare it made Caleb look up from the carburetor he was rebuilding. What he saw made his heart clench. A boy stood in the doorway, no more than 10 years old, with sandy hair falling across his forehead and eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. He wore a thick winter coat, jeans, and only one shoe. Where his left leg should have been, there was nothing but empty space and a crutch supporting his small frame. "Are you Mr. Turner?" the boy asked, his voice steady despite the slight tremor in his chin. "They say you can fix anything." Caleb set down his tools slowly, his mind racing. The boy's coat was expensive, something from a department store, not the thrift shops Caleb knew so well. But the desperation in those young eyes was universal, transcending any barrier of wealth or circumstance. "I try my best, son," Caleb replied, crouching down to meet the boy at eye level, his knees protesting the movement. "What's your name?" "Oliver Whitmore." The boy shifted on his crutch, his single foot finding purchase on the concrete floor. "I need your help, Mr. Turner. I need you to fix me." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He'd fixed countless broken things. Rusted transmissions, shattered windshields, engines that shouldn't run but somehow did under his careful hands. But a child who looked at him with such raw, unguarded hope. "Oliver, Caleb started, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell me what happened, buddy." Oliver's jaw tightened with a bravery that made Caleb's throat ache. "Car accident. 6 months ago. They had to take my leg." His hand gripped the crutch tighter, knuckles white. "The doctors say I need a prosthetic, but the good ones cost thousands and thousands of dollars. My mom works really hard, but even she can't afford the fancy ones that let you run and play soccer." Caleb's workshop suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Around them, broken parts and salvaged materials seemed to press in, a lifetime's collection of things others had thrown away, things Caleb had saved because he believed everything deserved a second chance. "The kids at school," Oliver continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, "they stare. Some of them are nice about it, but others, Mrs. Patterson, she's my neighbor, she told me about you. She said you once built a whole wheelchair ramp for Mr. Henderson out of old pallets and scrap wood. She said if anyone could help me, it would be you." Caleb stood slowly, turning away, so the boy wouldn't see the moisture gathering in his eyes. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of a sleek black car parked across the street, so out of place in this part of town, it might as well have been from another planet. But his attention returned immediately to Oliver. "I don't have any money," Oliver said, his voice cracking now, the brave facade finally showing its cracks. "But I can help you in the shop. I can sweep or organize tools or—" "Oliver," Caleb interrupted gently, turning back to face the boy. He saw himself at 10, different circumstances, same desperate need for someone to care. "Can you come back tomorrow after school? I need to think about this, measure some things, see what's possible." "Me." The hope that flooded Oliver's face was almost too much to bear. "Really? You'll try?" Caleb nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As Oliver left, navigating the doorway with practiced skill on his crutch, Caleb didn't notice the figure standing beside that expensive black car across the street, a woman with auburn hair and tear-stained cheeks, watching her son walk away with something she hadn't seen in 6 months. Hope. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything. The workshop felt different the next morning, as if Oliver's visit had rearranged something fundamental in its DNA. Caleb arrived before dawn, as always, but instead of immediately diving into the repair jobs that kept his lights on, he found himself standing motionless in the center of the space, staring at his hands. These hands had rebuilt engines, fabricated custom parts from scraps, welded broken frames back together, but could they build a leg? A real, functional prosthetic that a 10-year-old boy could walk on, run on, live on. "You're here early, even for you," came a gruff voice from the doorway. Marcus Webb, 52, who ran the metal fabrication shop 2 buildings down, stomped snow off his boots. He'd been Caleb's unofficial mentor since Caleb had opened this place 5 years ago. "What's eating at you?" Caleb explained about Oliver, watching Marcus's weathered face cycle through surprise, concern, and finally a knowing nod. "You're going to do it," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know the first thing about prosthetics, Marcus. I could hurt him. I could make things worse." "So you'll learn." Marcus walked to Caleb's workbench, running his hand over the scarred wood. "Remember when you told me you didn't know how to rebuild a differential? Or when you said you couldn't possibly fabricate a custom exhaust manifold? You figured it out because it mattered." He paused, his voice softening. "This kid matters." The morning passed in a blur of research. Caleb's ancient laptop, rescued from someone's trash, naturally, became his window into a world of biomechanics, weight distribution, socket fitting, and joint articulation. The complexity was staggering. Professional prosthetics were marvels of engineering, titanium and carbon fiber and microprocessors working in perfect harmony. He had wood, some metal scraps, leather from old car seats, and determination. When 3:30 arrived, Caleb was ready, even if ready meant simply committed to trying. Oliver appeared in the doorway right on schedule, his mother's car, that same black luxury sedan, visible in the parking lot. She didn't come in, Caleb noticed, just waited. "Hi, Mr. Turner." Oliver's enthusiasm was infectious, filling the cold workshop with warmth. "Hey, buddy, come here. I need to take some measurements." For the next hour, Caleb measured Oliver's residual limb with careful precision, sketching diagrams and taking notes. He measured Oliver's right leg for length and proportion. He watched how the boy moved, how he balanced, where his center of gravity fell. Oliver talked the entire time, a river of words about his school, his friend Jasper, who always saved him a seat at lunch, his teacher, Miss Keller, who let him skip PE but made him join the art club instead. Caleb learned that Oliver loved dinosaurs, hated broccoli, and dreamed of playing soccer again more than anything in the world. "My mom cries sometimes," Oliver said suddenly, quietly, during a pause in the measuring. "At night. She thinks I can't hear her, but I can. She blames herself for the accident. She was driving." Caleb's hands stilled on the measuring tape. "It wasn't her fault, was it?" "No. A drunk driver ran a red light, hit us from the side." Oliver's voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes held oceans. "Mom's okay, just some scars, but she looks at me sometimes like she wishes it had been her instead. I'm sure she's just grateful you're alive, Oliver." "Maybe," Oliver shrugged. "I just want to show her I'm okay, that I can still do things, that she doesn't have to cry anymore." After Oliver left, Caleb stood at the window, watching the black car pull away. The woman behind the wheel was just a silhouette, but he could feel her pain as if it were his own. She was giving her son to a stranger, trusting a poor mechanic with her child's hope. He couldn't let either of them down. That evening, Marcus returned with something unexpected: blueprints. Hand-drawn, detailed schematics of prosthetic leg designs from the 1800s and early 1900s, before modern materials and technology. "Found these in my grandfather's papers," Marcus explained. He was a carpenter who made prosthetics for Civil War veterans. If they could do it with the tools they had then, you can do it now. Caleb spread the papers across his workbench, studying the elegant simplicity of the designs. Wood and leather, metal hinges, straps and cushioning. Nothing electronic, nothing synthetic, just craftsmanship and care. "I'll need help," Caleb admitted. "You'll have it," Marcus promised. The next morning, Caleb stood before his collection of salvaged materials, like a general surveying his troops before battle. In the corner, weathered oak planks salvaged from a demolished barn. Against the wall, maple boards from an old church pew. Scattered across shelves, metal hinges, brackets, screws, and bolts of every size and description. Somewhere in this chaos was a miracle waiting to be assembled. He started with research, diving deeper into the biomechanics of walking. The human gait was astonishingly complex. Heel strike, foot flat, mid-stance, push-off. Each phase required specific support, flexibility, and strength. A prosthetic wasn't just a stick to stand on. It was a carefully engineered replacement for one of the body's most sophisticated mechanisms. By mid-morning, Sarah Chen, who owned the fabric shop on Main Street, appeared in his doorway carrying a box. Word had spread. "Heard about what you're doing for the Whitmore boy," she said, setting the box on his workbench. Inside was high-quality leather, sheepskin padding, and various strapping materials. "Consider it a donation to the cause." "Sarah, I can't." "You can, and you will." Her voice was firm but kind. "That boy's mother has donated to every charity in this city. Time someone gave back to her when she needs it." After Sarah left, Caleb opened his notebook and began sketching. The design had to be simple enough for him to build, but sophisticated enough to actually work. He drew and erased, calculated and recalculated, his coffee growing cold beside him. What Caleb didn't know was that across the street, in that same parked black car, Eleanor Whitmore sat watching through binoculars. She'd been there since dawn, a thermos of coffee keeping her company, her expensive coat doing little to ward off the emotional cold that had settled in her bones 6 months ago. She'd given Oliver permission to come here, yes, but every maternal instinct screamed at her to storm in and take her son away. This mechanic, this stranger working in a building that looked ready to collapse, was supposed to build something that medical engineers with advanced degrees struggled to perfect. But she stayed in her car, watching because of what she'd seen in Oliver's eyes yesterday. Hope, real, genuine hope for the first time since the accident. Inside the workshop, Caleb selected his wood carefully. Oak for the core structure, strong, durable, able to bear weight. Maple for the foot section, slightly more flexible, better shock absorption. He ran his hands over the grain, feeling for imperfections, selecting only the best pieces. Marcus arrived at noon with a friend, Thomas Rivera, who owned the leather shop on Superior Street. Thomas was carrying antique tools, specialized knives and punches for working leather. "My father made saddles," Thomas explained. "These tools shaped leather to fit horses. They'll work for fitting a socket to a boy's leg." The three men stood in the workshop, looking at each other with the gravity of their undertaking settling over them. "We're really doing this," Caleb said. "We're really doing this," Marcus confirmed. They began with the socket, the most critical component. This was where Oliver's residual limb would rest, where all his weight would be transferred to the prosthetic. Get this wrong, and everything else was useless. Worse, it could cause pain, sores, or injury. Caleb used the measurements he'd taken, creating a plaster mold based on Oliver's limb. It was painstaking work, requiring precision he'd never needed before. A millimeter too tight would cause pressure sores. A millimeter too loose would cause friction and blisters. As the afternoon faded, Caleb stood back to examine his work. The mold looked right, felt right. Tomorrow he would begin shaping the leather socket to fit it perfectly. Outside, Eleanor watched the light in the workshop glow warmer as darkness fell. She saw three men working, bending over a workbench, their body language speaking of concentration and care. One of them, the young one, Turner, stepped back and rubbed his eyes, fatigue evident even from this distance. He was really trying. This stranger was really, genuinely trying to help her son. Eleanor's phone buzzed with messages from her office. A real estate deal needing approval. A charity gala requiring her attendance. Board meetings and conference calls, and 1,000 obligations of her other life. She ignored them all, her eyes fixed on the workshop across the street, watching a poor mechanic attempt the impossible for no reason except that a child had asked him to. For the first time in years, Eleanor Whitmore questioned everything she thought she knew about the value of wealth. The workshop had become a place of transformation, though not just for the materials taking shape under Caleb's hands. Each evening, Oliver arrived at 3:30, and each evening that black car remained parked across the street, an elegant sentinel in a neighborhood of rust and survival. Caleb had noticed the car by now, had even caught glimpses of the woman inside. Oliver's mother, obviously, though the boy never mentioned her presence. Caleb understood. Some kinds of care required distance. Some kinds of love expressed themselves through silent vigil rather than interference. "How's it coming?" Oliver asked, bursting through the door with his usual explosion of energy. Despite the crutch, despite the missing leg, the boy moved through the world with a determination that humbled Caleb. "Come see for yourself." On the workbench lay the beginnings of a leg. The socket was nearly complete. Leather stretched and shaped over the mold, stitched with careful precision by Thomas's skilled hands. The oak core had been cut and shaped, its length exactly matching Oliver's right leg. The wooden surface was smooth as glass, hours of sanding evident in its finish. Oliver reached out tentatively, his small fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's not finished," Caleb cautioned, but he couldn't hide the pride in his voice. "Still needs the knee joint, the ankle, the foot, and then we have to fit it properly, make adjustments." "Can I help?" Caleb hesitated. The work required precision, focus, tools that could be dangerous in inexperienced hands. But then he looked at Oliver's face, saw the need there, not just for a prosthetic, but for ownership of his own recovery, for agency in his own story. "Absolutely. Grab that sandpaper over there. We need to smooth these edges until they're perfect." For the next hour, they worked side by side. Caleb showed Oliver how to sand with the grain, how to feel for imperfections, how to recognize when wood had been worked enough. The boy was a natural, his young hands careful and patient beyond his years. "My friend Jasper asked about the leg today," Oliver said, focused on his sanding. "He wanted to know if it would be like a pirate's peg leg. I told him it would be better. I told him Mr. Turner was making me something special." "No pressure there," Caleb joked, but his chest tightened. "I'm not worried," Oliver said with absolute conviction. "I trust you." Those 3 words carried more weight than any engine Caleb had ever lifted. A child's trust was a sacred thing, fragile and precious and terrifying in its completeness. Pastor James Mitchell from the community church appeared in the doorway late that afternoon, having heard about the project from Sarah Chen. He brought sandwiches, "You two need to eat," and stayed to watch them work, his kind eyes taking in the scene with quiet approval. "Reminds me of a parable," Pastor Mitchell said, settling onto a worn stool. "Loaves and fishes, taking what little you have and making it enough to feed the multitude. Except here, you're taking scraps and making something that'll help a boy walk." "It's just wood and leather," Caleb protested. "It's never just anything when it's done with love," the pastor replied. After Oliver left that evening, Caleb worked late into the night. The knee joint was the next challenge. It needed to bend naturally, to support Oliver's weight, to lock when necessary, but flex when needed. Marcus had fabricated metal brackets, using techniques from his grandfather's old designs, and together they engineered a simple but effective hinge system. Test, adjust, test again. The metal pieces whispered against each other, the sound of progress measured in millimeters. Across the street, Eleanor sat in her car, wrapped in a blanket now, her assistant having brought her dinner that she'd barely touched. She should go home, she knew. She had an empire to run, calls to make, decisions that affected hundreds of employees. But she couldn't leave. Something about watching this man work with such dedication, such care, such absolute focus on her son's well-being without any thought of compensation. It was changing something fundamental inside her. She'd built her fortune through shrewd business deals, through seeing value where others saw none, through calculated risks and careful planning. But when had she last created something with her own hands? When had she last worked on something simply because it mattered, not because it would generate profit? Through the workshop window, she watched Caleb test the knee joint again and again, his patience infinite, his determination unshakable. This poor mechanic had more integrity in his oil-stained hands than most of the people in her boardroom possessed in their entire bodies. Her phone rang. Jeffrey, her chief operating officer. "Eleanor, where are you? The Sanderson acquisition needs your approval, and the team in Seattle is waiting for—" "Handle it, Jeffrey," she said quietly. "You have full authority to make the decision." "But Eleanor, this is a $50 million... Then it's a good thing I trust your judgment." She ended the call, silencing the phone completely. $50 million. She'd made and lost sums like that before. But across the street, a man who probably made $30,000 a year was pouring everything he had into helping her son for nothing. The true currency of the world, Eleanor was beginning to understand, wasn't traded on stock exchanges. The morning of the fourth day brought winter's first serious snow to Duluth, transforming the industrial neighborhood into something almost beautiful. But inside Turner's auto repair, the temperature was rising in ways that had nothing to do with the ancient space heater rattling in the corner. Caleb stared at the partially completed prosthetic, doubt coiling around his confidence like frost on window panes. The knee joint worked, yes, but was it smooth enough? Would it bind under Oliver's weight? The socket fit the mold perfectly, but Oliver wasn't a static mold. He was a growing, moving, living child. What if he failed? What if this contraption hurt Oliver instead of helping him? What if the boy's trust was misplaced? What if... "Stop it!" Marcus's voice cut through the spiral of anxiety. He'd arrived to find Caleb frozen at the workbench, hands hovering over the prosthetic, but not touching it. "I can hear you thinking from across the room, and it's not helping anyone." "Marcus, look at this." Caleb gestured at the leg. "We're basically guessing. What if the angle is wrong? What if the height is off? What if you remember that perfection is the enemy of progress?" Marcus interrupted. "Those old Civil War prosthetics my grandfather made? They weren't perfect either, but they gave men their lives back. They gave them the ability to work, to walk, to feel human again. Those men were adults. Oliver is a child. He deserves your best effort, which is exactly what he's getting." Marcus picked up the prosthetic, examining it with a craftsman's eye. "This is good work, Caleb. Better than good. But it'll never be finished if you're too afraid of imperfection to move forward." A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman Caleb didn't recognize stood there, professional and polished, carrying a tablet. For a moment, his heart sank. Someone from social services, perhaps, here to shut down this unauthorized medical intervention. "Mr. Turner?" The woman extended her hand. "I'm Dr. Lisa Hammond. I'm a physical therapist at St. Luke's Hospital. I heard about what you're doing for young Oliver." Caleb's throat went dry. Here it came, the official shutdown, the lawsuit, "I'd like to help if you'll let me." Caleb blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Doctor." Hammond stepped inside, her professional demeanor softening as she took in the workshop's humble state. "I've been working with Oliver since his accident. His mother, Mrs. Whitmore, can afford the best prosthetics money can buy. But Oliver insisted on coming here. He talks about you constantly, about the magic leg Mr. Turner is building." She set her tablet on the workbench, pulling up diagrams and specifications. "I can't officially be involved. Liability issues, you understand. But I can offer guidance. I can show you what to watch for in terms of fit and function. I can help you understand the biomechanics so you're not just guessing." Relief flooded through Caleb so intensely his knees went weak. "Why would you do this?" Dr. Hammond smiled. "Because in 6 months of therapy, I've never seen Oliver as motivated as he's been this week. Hope is a powerful healing tool, Mr. Turner. You've given him something no prescription can provide. For the next 3 hours, Dr. Hammond guided them through the finer points of prosthetic fitting. She explained gait patterns, pressure points, how to identify and prevent skin breakdown. She showed them how to adjust the socket for optimal fit, how to angle the foot for natural walking motion, how to balance the entire structure for stability. The materials are unconventional. she admitted, examining the wooden components. "But the principles are sound. Actually, wood has advantages. It's naturally shock absorbent. It can be shaped and reshaped as needed, and it breathes better than some synthetic materials." When Oliver arrived that afternoon, Dr. Hammond was still there. The boy's face lit up like the Christmas lights that had started appearing on Main Street. "Dr. Hammond, you're helping too." "Just offering some technical advice, Oliver. Mr. Turner is doing all the real work." "Can I try it today?" Oliver asked, his excitement barely contained. "Not quite yet, buddy," Caleb said gently. "We still need to finish the foot assembly and do final fitting adjustments. But soon, very soon." Dr. Hammond pulled Oliver aside for a quick examination, checking his residual limb for any issues, asking about pain or discomfort. Caleb watched them, grateful for her professional eye, grateful for her willingness to risk her reputation to help. Outside, Eleanor watched this new development with growing curiosity. She recognized Dr. Hammond had specifically hired her as Oliver's therapist. That Lisa would come here, would offer her expertise to this makeshift project, spoke volumes. Eleanor's phone had been silent all day. Her entire staff knew better than to disturb her now. She'd cancelled meetings, delegated decisions, and essentially put her business life on hold. Her best friend Victoria had called the previous evening, concerned. "Eleanor, people are talking. You're never unavailable. What's going on?" Eleanor had looked across the street at the warm light spilling from the workshop window. "I'm watching a miracle happen, Victoria. A real one." Now, as snow fell softly around her car, Eleanor made a decision. She pulled out her phone and called her personal attorney. "Richard, I need you to set up a trust fund, anonymous. Enough to cover the boy's education, medical expenses, whatever he might need. But it has to remain completely confidential. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tells him where the money came from, the whole thing gets shut down. Can you do that?" "Of course, Eleanor, but I have to ask, if it's anonymous, why do it at all?" Eleanor watched Caleb and Oliver through the window, their heads bent together over the workbench, the mechanic's patient hands guiding the boy's smaller ones. "Because some gifts aren't meant to be acknowledged, Richard. Some gifts are just meant to exist." Morning light caught the dust motes floating through the workshop like tiny stars, and for the first time in a week, Caleb allowed himself to hope. The prosthetic was nearly complete, beautifully complete, if he was being honest with himself. The wood gleamed with protective finish, the leather socket was soft as butter, and the mechanical components moved with a smoothness that surprised even Marcus. "You've outdone yourself," Thomas said, running his expert hands over the leatherwork. "My father would have been proud of this craftsmanship, but Caleb couldn't celebrate yet. The real test was coming." Oliver arrived early that day, having somehow convinced his school to let him leave after lunch. His excitement was palpable, filling the workshop with nervous energy. "Is it ready? Can I try it? Does it work?" "Slow down there, buddy," Caleb laughed, though his own hands trembled slightly as he lifted the prosthetic. "First, we need to do a careful fitting. Dr. Hammond will be here any minute to supervise." She arrived right on schedule, along with an unexpected visitor, Nurse Rebecca Torres from the hospital, carrying what looked like first aid supplies. "Heard you might need an extra pair of trained hands," Rebecca explained. "Besides, I've been following Oliver's progress. Wouldn't miss this for the world." The fitting process was meticulous and careful. Caleb had Oliver sit on a padded bench while they worked the socket over his residual limb, checking for pressure points, making sure the sheepskin liner was positioned correctly, adjusting the straps for optimal distribution of weight. Oliver's face cycled through emotions, anticipation, hope, nervousness, and finally, as the prosthetic settled into place, wonder. "How does it feel?" Dr. Hammond asked professionally, her hands checking the fit with practiced expertise. "Different," Oliver said thoughtfully. "Not bad different, just different. Like my leg is there again, but not the same." "That's exactly right," Dr. Hammond confirmed. "It'll take time for your brain to adjust, to learn how to use it properly. We'll need to do physical therapy, strengthen muscles you haven't used in 6 months. But I can try walking now, right?" Oliver's eagerness was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Very carefully and with support," Caleb said, positioning himself on one side while Marcus took the other. Dr. Hammond and Rebecca stood ready to assist. Oliver gripped their arms, his knuckles white with determination. Slowly, carefully, he shifted his weight onto the prosthetic. The wood creaked softly, the leather socket held firm, the knee joint locked into place just as it was designed to do. And Oliver stood on two legs for the first time in 6 months. The sound that escaped him was half laugh, half sob. Tears streamed down his face as he looked down at himself, at the wooden leg that made him whole again, at the people supporting him literally and figuratively. "I'm standing," he whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly might break the spell. "I'm really standing." Across the street, Eleanor Whitmore pressed her hand against the car window, her own tears falling freely. Through the binoculars, she could see her son's face, could see the pure joy radiating from him, and something inside her chest, something that had been frozen since the accident, finally cracked open. "One step," Dr. Hammond coached gently. "Just one to start. Transfer your weight forward slowly. Let the prosthetic take it gradually." Oliver nodded, his entire being focused on the monumental task of moving forward. His right leg lifted, moved forward 6 inches, planted. Then with infinite care and absolute courage, he shifted his weight and brought the prosthetic leg forward. One step. The workshop erupted in cheers. Marcus was wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Thomas was grinning so wide his face had to hurt. Rebecca was clapping, and Dr. Hammond was making notes on her tablet with shaking hands while simultaneously smiling. But Caleb just watched Oliver, watched the boy's face transform as he realized what he'd accomplished, and felt something in his own heart shift permanently. This was why he'd become a mechanic, not for the money he'd never made, but for moments like this, for the ability to take broken things and make them whole again, even when the broken thing was a child's future. "Can I do another?" Oliver asked. "One more?" Dr. Hammond said. "Then we rest and evaluate." Oliver took a second step, more confident now, the prosthetic performing exactly as designed. Then he stopped, breathing hard, not from exertion, but from overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Turner," he said, his voice thick with tears he was trying to control, "I can walk again. You made it so I can walk again." Caleb knelt down, bringing himself to Oliver's level. "You were always going to walk again, buddy. I just helped build the tool that makes it possible. Your courage, your determination, your willingness to try, that's all you." Oliver wrapped his arms around Caleb's neck, the prosthetic leg keeping him balanced with its unwavering support. "Thank you," the boy whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." In her car, Eleanor made another phone call, this one to her lawyer again. "Richard, that anonymous trust fund, double it, and set up another one. For Mr. Turner's workshop, he's going to need tools, materials, a proper heating system. But again, completely anonymous. If he finds out where it's coming from, the deal's off, I know," Richard finished. "Eleanor, you're a good person. You know that, right?" Eleanor watched the celebration through the workshop window, watched strangers who'd become a team celebrate a child's victory together. "I'm learning to be," she said softly. "I'm learning." The next 2 weeks became a rhythm of progress and adjustment, a dance between hope and challenge that tested everyone involved. Oliver came to the workshop every afternoon, and every afternoon brought new milestones and new obstacles. The first week, they focused on simply walking, short distances, carefully monitored with constant adjustments to the prosthetic as they discovered pressure points or slight misalignments. Caleb had created a makeshift parallel bar system from old pipes, giving Oliver something to hold while he practiced. 10 steps today," Oliver announced one afternoon, his pride evident. "Doctor," Hammond said, "that's excellent progress." But progress came with pain. The residual limb developed sore spots where the socket rubbed. Oliver never complained, but Caleb could see him wince, could see the careful way he removed the prosthetic at the end of each session. Those moments drove Caleb back to the workbench late into the night, reshaping the socket, adding more padding, adjusting the angles microscopically. Each modification brought improvement, brought Oliver closer to comfort. Marcus brought friends, other craftsmen and women from the neighborhood who heard about the project and wanted to contribute. Carmen Silva, who worked leather goods at the farmer's market, showed Caleb techniques for making the socket even softer. David Park, a retired orthopedic surgeon who sometimes volunteered at the free clinic, stopped by to offer medical insight. "You've built something remarkable here," Dr. Park said, examining the prosthetic with professional admiration. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary. But more than that, you've created a community around this boy. That's healing too." The community aspect had become undeniable. Sarah Chen from the fabric shop started dropping by with cookies. Pastor Mitchell came regularly, sometimes to pray, sometimes just to watch and encourage. Even Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who'd first told Oliver about Caleb, visited to see the progress. "You've given this neighborhood something to believe in," she told Caleb one evening. "In a place where people are used to managing without, you've shown us what's possible when we come together." But the person who never came inside, who never made her presence known, continued her silent vigil across the street. Eleanor had been there every single day, watching her son's transformation through binoculars and distance. She'd learned things about Caleb Turner through her observations. He arrived at the workshop before dawn and often didn't leave until midnight. He survived on coffee and whatever food the neighborhood brought him. He turned away paying customers to work on Oliver's prosthetic, sacrificing income he clearly needed. One particularly cold evening, Eleanor watched him work alone after Oliver had gone home. The workshop's heating was clearly inadequate. She could see Caleb's breath in the air, but he worked anyway, making another adjustment to the ankle joint, seeking perfection he'd probably never achieve, but pursuing it anyway. On impulse, Eleanor got out of her car and walked to the coffee shop 2 blocks away. She returned with hot coffee and a bag of food, then faced a dilemma. She couldn't just walk in. Oliver didn't know she'd been watching, didn't know about her daily presence. She set the coffee and food on the workshop steps, knocked on the door, and quickly returned to her car before Caleb could answer. Through the binoculars, she watched him open the door, find the gift, look around in confusion, then slowly smile. He thought it was from the neighborhood. He thought it was just another act of community kindness. Eleanor settled back in her seat, satisfied. Let him think that. Let him continue believing in the goodness of ordinary people, because he was proving that goodness every single day. By the end of the second week, Oliver was walking without support. His gait was still awkward, still required concentration, but he was doing it. More importantly, he was smiling again, genuinely, unreservedly smiling. "Look, Mr. Turner," Oliver called one afternoon, walking the full length of the workshop without holding on to anything. "I'm doing it! I'm really doing it!" Caleb watched with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness. The project was nearly complete. Soon Oliver wouldn't need to come to the workshop every day. Soon this chapter would end. "You're doing amazing, buddy. Absolutely amazing." Oliver stopped in front of him, balancing easily now on the prosthetic. "Can I tell you something, Mr. Turner?" "Of course. Before the accident, I wanted to be a race car driver when I grew up. Then, after, I thought I couldn't do anything anymore. I thought I was broken forever." Oliver's voice was steady, mature beyond his years. "But now I think I want to be like you. I want to help people fix things, important things." The words hit Caleb with unexpected force. He'd never thought of himself as a role model, never imagined his simple act of kindness could reshape a child's entire future. "Oliver, you can be anything you want to be. This leg doesn't limit you. It just changes how you get there." "I know," Oliver said with absolute confidence. "You taught me that." That evening, after Oliver left, Caleb sat alone in the workshop, Oliver's words echoing in his mind. In trying to help one child, had he somehow helped himself too? Had he found purpose in a life that had felt purposeless for so long? Outside, Eleanor sat in her car, her phone forgotten in her lap, watching the lights in the workshop dim as Caleb finally called it a day. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow, she would finally introduce herself. It was time. The morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of winter day that made Duluth's harsh climate almost worth enduring. Caleb stood in the workshop doorway, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered neighborhood in shades of pink and gold. Today was the day. The prosthetic was complete, truly, finally complete. All the adjustments had been made, all the fine-tuning finished. Oliver had been walking well for days now, building strength and confidence with each step. Today, they would do the final test, the one Oliver had been dreaming about since the first day he'd walked into this workshop. Today, Oliver was going to run. Dr. Hammond arrived early, along with Rebecca and, surprisingly, Dr. Park. Word had spread through the medical community about what was happening in this humble workshop, and everyone wanted to witness the conclusion. "Are we ready for this?" Dr. Hammond asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "He's ready," Caleb confirmed. "The leg is solid, the socket fits perfectly, and he's built up enough strength and balance. If he wants to try, I think we should let him." Marcus had arrived the night before and cleared a path in the snow outside the workshop, a straight, level track about 50 yards long. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a boy to feel like he was flying. When Oliver arrived at noon, having convinced his mother to let him skip school for this momentous occasion, he immediately sensed something different in the air. "Today's the day, isn't it?" he asked, his eyes wide. "We're going to try running today." "If you feel ready," Caleb said. "No pressure. We can wait if—" "I'm ready," Oliver interrupted with absolute certainty. "I've been ready my whole life for this moment." They fitted the prosthetic carefully, checking everything twice, making sure every strap was secure, every connection solid. Oliver stood, walked a few practice steps, and then looked at the cleared path outside with the expression of a runner eyeing the starting line. The small group followed him outside. Caleb, Marcus, Dr. Hammond, Rebecca, Dr. Park, Thomas, Sarah Chen, Pastor Mitchell, and a handful of neighbors who'd somehow heard about today's big test. They lined the path, creating a gauntlet of support and love. Eleanor stood at the far end of the path, finally visible, finally stepping out of her car. She'd been hidden for weeks, but today she needed to be present. Today she needed her son to see her face when he achieved the impossible. Oliver saw her and froze. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Watching my son make history," Eleanor said, her voice catching. "If that's okay with you." For a moment, mother and son just looked at each other across the snowy distance, months of pain and love and hope flowing between them. Then Oliver nodded and turned his attention to the path before him. "Start slow," Dr. Hammond coached. "Walk first, then if it feels good, try a light jog. Listen to your body. Stop if anything hurts." Oliver nodded, his face set with determination. He started walking, each step confident now, the prosthetic moving in harmony with his body as if it had always been there. 10 steps, 20, 30, smooth and steady. Then, somewhere around step 40, something shifted. Oliver's pace increased. His stride lengthened, the walk became a jog, and then gloriously, impossibly, wonderfully he ran. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't smooth. The prosthetic's gait was mechanical, the wooden foot striking the packed snow with solid thuds that echoed like a heartbeat. But Oliver was running, his arms pumping, his breath coming in excited gasps, his face radiant with joy. The crowd erupted. People were crying, cheering, clapping. Sarah was openly sobbing into Pastor Mitchell's shoulder. Marcus had his arm around Thomas, both men grinning through tears. Dr. Hammond was taking video on her phone, professionally documenting what she knew was a moment she'd remember forever. And Caleb stood motionless, watching this child, this brave, determined, incredible child, run toward his mother with everything he had. The wooden leg he'd built from scraps carrying Oliver forward into a future full of possibility. Oliver reached Eleanor and crashed into her arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. Eleanor held her son, feeling him alive and whole and happy in her embrace, feeling the miracle of his presence in a way she'd taken for granted before the accident. "I did it, Mom. Did you see? I ran. I actually ran. I saw, baby. I saw everything." Eleanor looked over Oliver's head at Caleb, who stood quietly at the other end of the path, letting this moment belong to mother and son. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, Eleanor knew what she had to do. She gently released Oliver and walked toward Caleb, her expensive boots crunching in the snow, her elegant coat incongruous in this working-class neighborhood. She stopped in front of him, this poor mechanic who'd given her son back his future, and extended her hand. "Mr. Turner, I'm Eleanor Whitmore. I believe we need to talk." Caleb shook her hand, confused but polite. "Ma'am, your son is amazing. He did all the hard work. I just built the tool." "You did so much more than that," Eleanor said softly, glancing back at Oliver, who was now demonstrating his running ability for the delighted crowd. "And I've been watching you do it every single day for the past 3 weeks." Understanding dawned on Caleb's face. The car across the street. "That was you. Every morning to every evening," Eleanor confirmed. "I had to know. I had to see if you were genuine, if this was real, if I could trust you with my son's hope." "And?" Caleb asked. Eleanor smiled, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "And I saw something I haven't seen in years, Mr. Turner. I saw someone who gives everything without expecting anything in return. I saw craftsmanship and care and love built into every piece of that prosthetic. I saw a community come together because one person decided that helping a child mattered more than profit or convenience." She paused, pulling an envelope from her pocket. "Which is why I'd like to offer you something." Caleb eyed the envelope warily. "Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't do this for payment. Oliver needed help and It's not payment for the leg," Eleanor interrupted gently. "It's an investment in what you could do next." Caleb stared at the envelope in Eleanor's hand as if it were a live grenade. Around them, the celebration continued. Oliver was now walking with some of the neighborhood kids, showing off his new mobility, his laughter carrying across the snow like music. "Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate the gesture, but please just listen," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard, but softened by genuine emotion. "For 3 weeks I've watched you work. I've seen you sacrifice paying jobs to focus on my son. I've seen you stay late into the night, perfecting details no one else would notice. I've watched this entire neighborhood rally around you because you've proven that kindness still exists in the world." She opened the envelope, revealing a check. Caleb glanced at it and went pale. "That's Mrs. Whitmore, I can't accept this. This is enough to properly heat your workshop, upgrade your tools, purchase quality materials, and still have operating capital for 6 months." Eleanor finished. "It's not charity, Mr. Turner. It's an investment in your business." "But I didn't do this as a business transaction," Caleb protested, his voice rising slightly. "I did it because a kid needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. Taking money for it now feels like you're being valued for your skills and time," Marcus interrupted, having overheard the conversation. He walked over, his expression stern. "Caleb, for once in your life, accept help. You're always fixing things for other people for barely enough to keep the lights on. Someone wants to actually pay you what you're worth, and you're going to refuse." "It's different," Caleb insisted. "Why?" Eleanor asked simply. "Because I have money? Because accepting it makes you feel like you weren't doing this purely out of the goodness of your heart?" She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his directly. "Mr. Turner, you've already proven your character. No amount of money can change what you've done or why you did it, but refusing help when it's freely offered, that's pride, not principle." Dr. Hammond joined them, adding her perspective. "Caleb, do you know how many children in this city need exactly what you've given Oliver? Kids whose families can't afford modern prosthetics, who fall through the cracks of the medical system. With proper tools and materials, you could help dozens of them." The weight of her words settled over Caleb like the snow falling gently around them. He looked at Oliver, now sitting with a group of children, all of them examining the wooden leg with fascination and acceptance. One little girl, maybe 8 years old, was asking if Mr. Turner could make her something to help her walk too. She had a club foot, her mother explained quietly, and surgery was beyond their means. "You see," Eleanor said softly, "this isn't about one child anymore. This is about what becomes possible when someone with your skills has the resources to truly help." Caleb's hands trembled as he took the check, staring at numbers that represented more money than he'd seen in years. "What if I fail? What if I can't help others the way I helped Oliver?" "Then you'll have tried," Pastor Mitchell said, having joined the growing circle of people around Caleb. "And trying with love and skill is all any of us can do." Eleanor wasn't finished. "I have another proposal if you're willing to hear it." Caleb laughed shakily. "I'm not sure my heart can take another proposal. I want to create a foundation, the Turner Foundation for Accessible Prosthetics. You would run it, make the decisions about who to help and how. I would provide funding and handle the business side, legal, insurance, all the bureaucratic nonsense that would keep you from the actual work." Eleanor's eyes shone with an excitement Caleb was beginning to understand. "Together, we could build something that changes lives." "Why me?" Caleb asked. "Why not hire professional prosthetists, engineers, people with degrees and credentials?" "Because they build with their heads," Eleanor replied. "You build with your heart, and I've learned over the past 3 weeks that sometimes the heart knows better." Oliver limped over, the exertion of running having tired him, but his spirit clearly undiminished. "Mr. Turner, Jenny's mum says she needs help too. Can you help her, like you helped me?" Caleb looked down at the boy, at the hope in his eyes, at the wooden leg that had become a bridge between isolation and community. Then he looked at the small crowd that had gathered, people from this neighborhood who'd contributed their skills, their materials, their time, simply because it mattered. "I think," Caleb said slowly, "that I can't help her, but we can." Eleanor smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. This was never about one person's heroism. It was about what a community could accomplish when they worked together. "Then we have a deal?" she asked, extending her hand again. Caleb took it, feeling the surreal nature of the moment. A poor mechanic shaking hands with a millionaire, bridging a gap that should have been unbridgeable. "We have a deal, but on one condition." "Name it." "Oliver stays involved. He helped build his own prosthetic, learned the process. Other kids should have that same ownership of their recovery." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again. "You're a remarkable man, Caleb Turner." "I'm just a mechanic who got lucky enough to help a kid who deserved it," Caleb replied. "No," Oliver interjected firmly. "You're a hero. My hero." The celebration that followed was spontaneous and joyful. Someone produced a cake from somewhere. Sarah, probably. Coffee appeared, courtesy of the shop down the street. People who'd been strangers 3 weeks ago embraced like old friends, united by their participation in something larger than themselves. Eleanor stood slightly apart, watching her son at the center of it all, finally understanding what wealth truly meant. It wasn't the money in her bank account or the property she owned. It was this, the ability to create moments like this, to facilitate connections, to make possible what seemed impossible. Her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her office. Another deal, another crisis, another demand on her time. She silenced it without reading the message. Some things were more important than business. 6 months later, spring had transformed Duluth from a winter wonderland into a city blooming with possibility, and nowhere was that transformation more evident than at the newly opened Turner Foundation workshop, housed in a renovated warehouse on Superior Street. The space was unrecognizable from Caleb's old workshop. Proper heating, professional tools, dedicated areas for woodworking, metalworking, and fitting. But the heart of it remained the same, a place where broken things became whole again. Caleb stood in the main workspace, watching his team of volunteers and part-time professionals work on 3 different prosthetics simultaneously. Marcus supervised the metal fabrication. Thomas handled the leatherwork. Dr. Hammond consulted on medical aspects, and Oliver, now 11 and walking so confidently on his wooden leg that sometimes people didn't even notice it, was helping a shy 7-year-old girl named Sophie fit her new arm prosthetic. The cool thing is, Oliver was explaining to Sophie, you get to help build it, so it's really yours, you know? You understand how it works, how to fix it if something goes wrong. You're not just wearing it, you're part of it. Caleb smiled, listening to Oliver repeat the same philosophy he'd learned during his own journey. The boy had become an unofficial junior mentor, relating to the children in ways the adults couldn't quite manage. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, as she did most afternoons now. She'd restructured her business life, delegating more, attending fewer meaningless meetings, focusing on what mattered. She served as the foundation's director, handling funding, legal issues, and outreach to families who needed help. We have 6 new applications, she told Caleb, holding up a folder. 2 from Minnesota, 1 from Wisconsin, and 3 from as far as Colorado. Word is spreading. Can we handle 6 more? Caleb asked, though his eyes already showed he knew the answer. We'll figure it out. We always do. It was true. In 6 months, they'd helped 14 children. 14 kids who couldn't afford commercial prosthetics, but who'd received custom-built devices crafted with care and love. Each one was unique, each one built with the child's participation, each one representing not just a physical tool, but an emotional journey. Pastor Mitchell arrived with lunch for the crew, a tradition he'd started, claiming everyone needed to eat and fellowship together. As sandwiches were distributed and people gathered, Caleb found himself surrounded by the community that had grown around this mission. Speech, Marcus called out, grinning. The boss should say a few words. I'm not the boss, Caleb protested. We're all speech, everyone chorused, including Oliver. Caleb stood reluctantly, looking around at the faces that had become family. Okay, fine, but I'll keep it short, because unlike you all, I'm not good with words. He paused, gathering his thoughts. 6 months ago, a kid walked into my old workshop and asked me to fix him. I didn't think I could do it. I was scared of failing, scared of letting him down, scared of trying something so far outside my skill set. Oliver grinned at him encouragingly, but I learned something important. I learned that we're never alone in our efforts if we're willing to accept help. Every person in this room contributed something to Oliver's leg. Expertise, materials, time, encouragement. And every prosthetic we've built since has been the same. A team effort, a community effort. He looked directly at Eleanor. I also learned that wealth isn't about money. It's about what you do with whatever resources you have. Some people have money, some have skills, some have time or knowledge or just the ability to make others smile. Real wealth is using what you have to help others use what they have. Eleanor wiped her eyes, nodding. So, thank you, Caleb continued. Thank you for teaching me that miracles aren't supernatural events. They're what happens when ordinary people decide that someone else's well-being matters more than their own convenience. They're what happens when we work together. The room erupted in applause. Sophie, the little girl with the new arm, raised it high and waved enthusiastically, delighting in her new mobility. After lunch, Caleb found Eleanor standing outside, looking at the foundation's sign above the door. Turner Foundation for Accessible Prosthetics, it read, with a tagline underneath, Building Hope, One Step at a Time. Regrets? Caleb asked, joining her. About what? All of this. The time, the money, the energy. You could have just written a check to a charity and called it good. Eleanor shook her head. This is the best investment I've ever made, not because of the tax write-off or the good publicity, but because I get to see faces like Sophie's light up when she realizes she can hug her mother with 2 arms again, because I get to watch my son grow into an empathetic, skilled young man who understands the value of service, because I get to be part of something real. She turned to face him. You gave me my son back, Caleb, not just physically, but emotionally. He was drowning in despair after the accident, and you threw him a lifeline made of wood and hope. That's not something you can put a price on. We gave him back to each other, Caleb corrected. Your love, your willingness to let him come to a stranger's workshop, your trust, that mattered just as much. They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the window as the team worked, as children laughed, as miracles were constructed from scraps and skill and love. What's next? Eleanor asked. Caleb smiled. There's a teenager in Montana who needs a leg, a little boy in Iowa who lost his hand in a farm accident, a girl in Chicago whose family just contacted us. What's next is we keep going. One person, one prosthetic, one miracle at a time. Sounds perfect, Eleanor said. Inside, Oliver called out, Mr. Turner, Sophie wants to show you her arm. It's working perfectly. Caleb and Eleanor exchanged a glance, then headed back inside together. A mechanic and a millionaire who discovered that the distance between their worlds was much smaller than anyone imagined. That compassion could bridge any gap. That kindness could transform any darkness. That hope, carefully crafted and lovingly given, could change everything. As we close this story, remember that miracles don't require magic. They require people who care enough to try. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. We love hearing from our global family. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that hope still exists, that kindness still matters, and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they work together. Thank you for being part of our community. And remember, you have the power to build miracles too, one small act of kindness at a time.